Hello friends, today we will be covering covering the topic of simplifying from photographs. So we will try to pick up a photograph and try to make a watercolor out of it by trying to simplify the subject. So whenever you do work from photograph, you need to simplify the subjects. You don't have to put in every details from the photograph to the watercolor paper. So if you attempt to do so, that if you pick up every detail from the reference photograph and if you try to copy it, then you will most likely end up making a bad painting, because you don't really need a lot of details. You need to really find out what the photograph is inspiring you, and then you need to select those elements and then copy those into the into your artwork, and maybe you could make some changes, make some alterations to increase or to improve the layout, the visual presentation of it, so to make it more appealing, more message conveying, more interesting, etc. So today we will be taking a simple photograph and we will see how we can simplify it, and we will try to make a watercolor out of it. So the subject picked up for today is this one, right? So this is the subject that we will be picking up today. So if you look at this, it is not very complex reference. I deliberately took a less complex subject because I don't want to confuse or I don't want to complicate the things. So we'll discuss some aspects of simplifying it, but we will try to keep it kind of minimalistic presentation of this, not too much details. Then once we are done with that level, maybe we will add some of our own details. We might add some details to make it a little bit more visually appealing or pleasing or interesting, right? So now we have to decide how we can simplify it. So whenever you get a subject, say for any subject for that matter, whenever you pick up a subject, you have to first decide what area you are going to copy. Alright, so to decide that, you have to decide what is going to be your orientation, whether you are making an artwork which is in portrait mode or in landscape mode, right? I will tell what it is. So to explain that process, what I will do is I will take two L-shaped papers which I have cut. These are just normal watercolor papers. I have cut it into an L shape. So I will make a rectangular frame out of it, something like this, and then decide, okay, what area I want to copy, what area of the subject I want to copy. Do I want to copy this much? This looks good to me, in fact, right? So this is much more narrow, less height and more width. Maybe if you are going for a portrait mode, we will go for something like this. See, in most of the cases, I want to keep the boat within the frame. I want to keep this boat within the frame. I want to then decide how I am going to place the rest of the element. What are the other elements I want to cover? Where do I really want the boat to be present? This is how I would proceed if I was making a portrait mode, that is, the height is more and the width is less. If I was going for that mode, probably I would have gone for this kind of an approach. But today for our discussion, I prefer to do a landscape mode. So I have to decide what will be my frame, right? So let us see what is more appealing. So one thing you have to pay attention to is what is going to be the size of your watercolor paper. See, for example, this is the width of the watercolor paper I am going to take, and this is the height. So you need to take approximately what is the ratio of the width to height. So you have to make your frame in proportion to that. So I would say that it is slightly more wide than the height, but around this much I would say is the aspect ratio of the paper. That means around, if this was the actual height, this is the width. That is the kind of proportion I have for the paper. So I need to keep that proportion, and then you can make it smaller or larger, in fact, but keeping that proportion, right? Something like this you can make it, but honoring that proportion. So let us make, this is approximately the proportion. So probably this much is what I would like for the frame, right? So this is what I would probably make the frame. So once you make that decision, you have two options probably. That is, one is that you just remember, okay, this is my frame, I need to be within this frame. Okay, that is one part of it. Otherwise, you just crop your image digitally and make it of this size, right? So it is your choice. So while making the choice, you make it composition wise, you make it appealing. So here, if you really look, this is somewhere coming into the rule of third, I mean falling in with the matching with the rule of third, and this is at the ideal position, this focal element. So this is what I want to keep it as a focal element, so I would like to keep it somewhere here. Okay, then for the rest of the things, we will make it very simple. We will not give much details for the stones or this whatever wall or stone structure, the coconut tree and the distant foliages. We'll just make it very simple. The idea is to make it simple. The idea is to avoid all the complexities. See, if you want to really make it hyper realistic, you can do that, but our approach for today's session is to make it simple, right? So we have to make a sketch of this, just to ensure that our idea can work. So what I am going to do next is, I will make a drawing of this into a sketch paper, in the sketchbook, probably some sort of a thumbnail. So I will not make it the entire I will not make it a detailed drawing. I will just make a thumbnail kind of a thing, kind of a tonal study. So how the elements look with a tonal sketch, and then we will see if there is any addition needs to be placed or not, right? So we will keep it here. Okay, so this I'm not very comfortable here now, because this is kind of sliding, this, because the board is kept at an angle, the iPad is a little bit of sliding. So what I would do is I'll take another sketchbook. That was a sketchbook which is already filled, so I'll take this as my sketchbook, and I'll just keep it. I'll just keep this as I hope you can see both the reference and my sketchbook. Okay, fine. So this thumbnail sketch is supposed to be smaller in size. So what I am going to do is, I'll make a small frame which is somewhat proportional to what we have discussed earlier. Okay, this is the width, and this is the height, and this ratio is proportional to what I have for the watercolor paper, right? I'm not sure if you are hearing some disturbing noise, but hopefully I'll speak louder and make the audio clear to you, right? Now if you remember, our the frame that we have decided, try to remember that. This doesn't allow this doesn't allow me to crop properly, so I will try to remember the frame and then draw it. So maybe we have selected somewhere up to here, so let us make I don't want to really divide the sky and water area into half, then that is not treated as a good composition. So this is the horizon, the edge of water, you mean to say, and somewhere here you have the boat. That is, if you really remember, somewhere here we had the around 2/3 area we had the boat, right? So we'll make it final later. This somewhere here we had the boat, and here we had the reflection, and somewhere here we had this particular structure, okay, and we had some more things here. We don't want to make it exactly the way it is. Okay. So there. And here you have a lot of foliages. Okay, you don't want to make it with full details and all. So here you have some details, and maybe here you have some coconut trees and all. Okay, so let us make, and here you have some stones, some pebbles and all those stuff. We'll keep it simple, and maybe up to here you have the distant foliages. Okay, so let us just simply make it right, and we have some water movement kind of thing, and here you have the foliages. Here you have the foliages. Okay, and somewhere here we have those darker stone structure. We'll make it a little darker. The idea of the thumbnail sketch is to also get some tonal value in place first, so that you will get a feel of a grayscale version of what you are going to work, what is going to come out. Okay, now you have some stone kind of a structure here. Now you have the boat. So you don't have to be very precise here, because it is just some thumbnail drawing of this particular image. Okay. You don't need really very precise thing here. Now this is how it is going to be. Some tonal values for the water. Okay, maybe you can rub it if you want. Smudge it with the finger. Okay, now this is how it will look like, and if you really want, you can make some what do you call this? You can make give some simple tone to the sky also. So this is how it will look like when we make it. Okay, So if really you want, you could add some people here. Okay, you could make some people standing here, maybe some another guy doing something in something here. And this area looks a little bit of blank to me, so if you really want, probably you could do a smaller boat or something here. Something like this, maybe something here. I don't know what these things are. You can just make it something like this so that it overall makes some sense. So this is how we will proceed with the painting, right? Okay. Okay, now we will copy the drawing into watercolor paper. So if you look at the reference, this is the reference, because we have copied the essential elements from the actual reference photograph into this thumbnail. Okay, so we could then now we will make our drawing based on this particular thumbnail. Okay. So this is a relatively detailed drawing with a lot of tonal values, but when we draw on the watercolor paper, we will not use any tonal values. We will probably just use the key element shape and the key element shape and the placement. We will not do an elaborate drawing on the watercolor paper. So in watercolor paper, what I will do is make a division of sky and water. Maybe this much of sky, this much of sky, and this much of water, right? And somewhere here you have this. Here, this is very loose drawing. Okay, you just are kind of placing the key things. Okay. Now somewhere here I want the boat to be drawn. So I am not going to make the complete drawing on the boat. Okay, I will just make some very small drawing. Okay, I'll make the drawing precise when I really paint it. This is just a placement of where things are going to happen. Stay. I know this is little bit away from what we have seen. So every time you draw and you simplify it, things will deviate from the reference. If you want things to happen exactly as per the reference, then you have to put more effort, make the drawing much more in detail, and then do it. Here I am not interested in that way. Okay, so this much is my drawing, and the rest will do when in the painting phase, in the watercoloring phase. Alright, so we have the coconut trees and all. We will have coconut trees here. All those things we will try to make. Okay, we'll go for the painting now. Okay, let's make the washes now. So if you remember, you will see that the sky was not very bright. It is a little dull. So what I will do is, first I'll make a very dull wash of maybe I'll take cobalt blue. Okay, this is my palette. Before I start the washes, this is my palette, and this is cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, violet, burnt umber, burnt sienna, orange, Indian yellow, yellow ochre, rose sienna. These are probably the colors. I might use a touch of white if required. This will be most likely the color, and I might use little bit of olive green, right, for the foliages. These are the colors I'll be most likely using. And for the washes, I'll be using a big round brush, which is a synthetic brush, right? And I might also use some smaller brushes. This is a medium size round brush, a synthetic brush with a tip, another smaller synthetic brush with a tip, with a fine tip, and this is probably a liner brush. This is probably a liner brush that I will use, a long tapered brush. Right. Okay. Now let us make a pale wash for the sky. So how I do is, hopefully you can see my palette. How I use is like make little bit of cobalt blue, very pale, okay, very pale wash, and I tend to use little bit of raw umber to that. This tends to be little too much warm. Add little bit of cobalt blue to that. Okay, and I think this is okay. Little warmer wash. Okay. And see, this is when you want to see what exactly is the color going to appear on the paper, try to move the puddle with your brush and try to see what is the color you are seeing here at when there is no accumulation. See, here it is very light in color, here it is dark. This is when the pigments are accumulated, this is when it is very narrow. So this is the color which will appear on the paper. So you judge the color, and then once the color you are happy with, then you make the wash. Start from the left to right. It is a normal flat wash technique that you use. Make it fast, not a problem. Now I am using just water, and I am just pulling it down. I am just using water now, not pigments. So I am not really worried about the boards now. I am not leaving any white space, okay, because it's already very pale wash, so it doesn't really make much difference. Now I am going a little darker, because the water I am making little bit darker wash now, because it is coming towards the foreground now. So when it comes towards the foreground, things will appear darker. Okay. Now this area I want a warmer color, so I am leaving this area as white, because later I will apply little warmer color in that area. I'm not really worried about the exact color now. Here I want some white, but I am softening the edge. I don't want to keep any hard edge for this also. Okay. So this is the kind of wash. It's very pale wash. Okay. So now you can decide if you want some kind of a cloud or something. What you can do is make some darker variation of this here. Okay, some darker variation of this, probably a touch of violet. Sorry for the sound that might disturb you. Unexpectedly some digging work is happening nearby. Okay, so I'm not worrying about too much of clouds now. Just something. There is no cloud in fact in the reference, but still we are making a little bit. Okay, here if you see it has already dried, I think, to a certain extent. So I am just softening it. I am just taking plain water and softening the edge, applying it. You have to be careful when doing that because it might spoil. Okay, this is, you are really likely to spoil it, but let us keep, you have to keep trying and figuring it out what is the best way of softening. If some mistakes are, if some unwanted hard edges are happening, how best to soften. You can ideally you'll have to wait until it is dry. If the paper is already dry beyond some point, you have to wait until it is completely dry and then make the changes. Now here we need some foliages. See if it is dry enough. I think it is so. So if you really look at the reference, it has a tint of green. So I am using a tint of olive green along with the cobalt blue. Okay, and again I am dulling it with a little bit of burnt umber, and I am just making them. See, this is not in fact very far object. Okay, so I'm not going for very much soft edge for the. I'm not going for very soft edge because it's not that far in fact. Okay, so just to get some interest, I am sprinkling some water so that you will find some texture there. Some tonal variation, right? So now we have to really wait and make another coat because the water you see is little bit darker than the sky, so we'll have to make another layer for the water, but we'll wait for some time because this has to dry for that. Okay. So if you want, you can go for some reflection for this, but I think I'll not go for that. Taking a bit of cobalt blue to this. Okay, you have to judge the tone, and I think it is okay now. Be a little careful that the top edge of the water is always straight, so you have to be little careful. You have to be careful so that the edge is always, this edge is always very straight, so you can this is one area where you need to be little precise. Okay. Now, if you really see, there is, this area has some tone. there is some some bleeding happening here, but it's okay. I'm just not worrying too much about that now. Now again here I will make it little darker and dark. Just trying to get some kind of feeling of ripple here, rather than making it very flat, just making some ripple sort of things here. See, if you really want to know the details of all these things, we'll have to discuss it in detail, and then you may need a dedicated session for this itself. So let us keep it simple like this for now. Since this appears to be a kind of reflection here now, I think I will allow some more bleeding to happen, so that this is justified across. I'm just adding a little bit of this mix. So that there is some amount of sort of reflection. Don't worry too much about that. Okay. We'll keep it like this for now. Now we have to think of this area. Okay. This area is wet. Now we can work this area. Right. Now we have the coconut trees now. This is the coconut trees. Little bit difficult. I find it little difficult to draw in detail. So what we do is we will make it a simplified version of that. Little bit of cobalt blue and this one. Okay, and let us just make some strokes. Okay. This much is enough for the trunk of it. Okay, then I'll just sprinkle some water here. I always sprinkle some water to break the uniform tone of it, right? So we'll now go for these kind of foliages. For the foliages you can take I prefer to take olive green rather than any other color. Because olive green, to me at least, I think these are all, olive green is little bit of natural green, I feel. So I prefer olive green for all this. How you do really is, it is little difficult to get the foliages right, but you will then need a little bit of practice. Now what I am doing is I am mixing with olive green and some variation of blue, etc., and I am just filling it. Just filling with some varying colors. That's it. I am finding some yellows also in between, so I am just covering some. There are a lot of yellows in between, so I am just mixing some yellows. Okay, I am just finding some gaps also in between. Okay, some darker color. How I see it is some darker color, some lighter color, etc. So some kind of darker color, some purplish color, etc. really not buried too much, because it will all get filled. I mean, all the whatever details we leave here will be filled in the viewer's eye, because viewers always have their imagination. So I'm using some different tone. I'm just looking at the what do you call it as, at the reference, and I'm just trying to get some color, and I'm just trying to fill the gap. That's it. I see that a lot of brownish earthy tones are there. I think we could have added a little bit of more blue here, which we have missed, but anyway, that's okay. So don't ever try to make it exactly as that is in the reference, because I'm sure that you will always fail if you try to do that. So the only way you can succeed is just pay attention to what is happening on the paper, and then try to apply your artistic sense and try to modify it, try to alter it the way you want. Right. So this is how I'll do this one, and here also I'll just sprinkle some water. See, this creates a lot of texture here, so a lot of things are naturally formed, which will look good once it is dry. Okay, now that is done for the foliage. Now let us make some tone for this. See, this area is now wet, this is probably dry, this is also probably dry. You can always find certain area, when certain area is wet, you can always find something to work in the dry area. So here you can make some changes. So here, if you look at the reference, you will find that is little bit warmer in tone. So let us make that. Okay, this looks to be little brownish and violetish. So what I will do is I'll clean the brush and take some burnt sienna. That looks little brownish to me, so I'll use some burnt sienna and maybe even a little bit of yellow at some places. You'll have to judge. Okay, so this area seems to be a little bit more warmer. Some other area also are a little warmer. You just try to make. It also has some bluish tone, so I'm using a little bit of this bluish tone to this burnt sienna. See, because there is a lot of bluish tones that I'm finding there. Some variations, that's it. And try to make these strokes in the direction of the slant of the land. You see, it is sliding down, so try to make some of your strokes to justify that sliding down kind of thing. I'll make it little bit more darker, okay, because this is in a shadow area. I will make it little darker. When we finalize the things, we will make it little bit more darker. See, if you see, I am using very big brush. I am not going for small brushes and all, because I think you should try practicing using the biggest brush possible, because you need to apply bolder strokes as much as possible. So if you start worrying about continue to use smaller brush, your work will be very tight, I would say, because you won't get confidence if you continue with the narrow brushes. So you will have to go with bigger brushes, and if mistake happen, let it happen. Okay, I'm using some burnt sienna and olive green. Okay, I'm just trying to see the tone. Maybe I need little bit darker. So keep judging. There is no specific formula for all these things. Okay, now I'll just try to make this one. Try to do this in a single stroke. So it is not dark enough. Ideally, I should have made it a little darker. Now I have to make it dark by following the same stroke, because otherwise so I think there are a couple of more strokes here. We need some more. Let us see if some touches may be required in this area. We will do that later. Okay. Now let us come back here, and we'll have to work on the boat now. So, okay. So if you really think this area is too much white, you always have an opportunity to correct this. I would tend to apply a small layer of blue wash to make it little bluish. See, you might always do some mistakes, but you can correct it. It's not blue enough, but it is better to avoid such mistakes, because here you will now find some color tonal difference. You'll have to, if it is disturbing, we'll have to find some method to cover it up. Alright, okay. Now we'll have to wait until this is dry. Think if you have anything else that you can work with. So you can enhance some of these ripples in between if you want, but I'm not very sure if we should do that, because we might end up complicating the things. So let us leave it like this. Okay, let us leave it like this. Now if you remember our reference, we have a boat somewhere here. So let us make that boat for now. Let us make that boat with little bit of burnt sienna and maybe a little bit of cerulean blue. Okay. So let us make it here. say if you want, you can draw this in advance. You can draw with the, what do you call it as, you can draw with pencil now. This looks too much dark to me. I'm just touching a bit of, I'm taking a bit of white and kind of lighting it down a little bit. See, you might always get some argument that you should not use white in watercolor and all, but I am not a big advocate of that. I would say reduce the use of white, but when required you can use white to certain area, so that you get a convincing element. So what it matters is your work convincing enough? That is what is the one that matters ultimately. Then if it is convincing, then fine, you don't need anything, you can use white. If it is convincing, you can use white. Just one. If you want to strictly avoid using white, maybe you will have to leave white space in advance, and then you have to plan all your initial washes very carefully, so that all the white spaces, wherever you need white spaces, you actually leave white spaces. Then you are kind of compromising to the quality of initial wash that you are doing. Okay. Now let us make this particular boat. Here, if you see in the reference, that boat is having almost cerulean blue color. So let us try to use the same thing. It is whatever was the mix here. I am just using little bit of cerulean blue and also touching some burnt sienna to make it little dark. Okay. So you have to be careful about the shape of the boat and all, which I think is not today's topic. So you should know how to make the boat and all. How to make the boat, how to make the reflections, all those things are not covered in details, but basically you should know the basic shape of the boat, and you should also know in the basics of how the reflections will work. Okay. Here again I am doing a touch of white somewhere to make it little convincing. Okay, now all right. Now we have to start thinking of the details, right? Okay, now revisit now you have to apply your imagination. I mean, so until this you have made, you have taken all the references and you have placed the big shapes. Now you have to see what is missing, what needs to be enhanced. All those things you can take care of, and you can probably add elements from your own imagination. So what I would do is, I think some of these could be a little bit enhanced, darkened. Okay. And some more leaves should be there to justify these branches. I think there it is. Okay. That is sufficient for that. Now we have to make this area a little bit more darker. It is very much, I find it very much bluish violet, so I am using cobalt blue and violet and mixing that with a little bit of burnt sienna, because basically it is something which is brownish in nature. So I am just I'm just worrying about, is it dark enough? That's it. Here I have to be a little worried about some stones being there, so you cannot make it little very straight line-ish. Okay, I think that's enough. Somewhere I'm finding some bluish color there, so I'm just mixing it with the blue for some color variation. I'm just giving some touch of blue somewhere, because there are a lot of blues. I can see a lot of blues there. So now you have to some shadows of the stones. I'm just trying to make, that's it. You don't have to be very precise there. If you make it very precise, then you will fail. At the time of making all these things, you may think that it is not working, but I'm sure later you will find, okay, everything is working. Basically you have to make it little convincing, that's it. I think that's it for that. Okay, now we can make some details for this boat. I'm taking some darker tone, maybe a little bit of ultramarine and Cobalt, ultramarine and burnt sienna I am taking, because ultramarine is little bit more darker. See the consistency, it is very thick now. Okay. Now you'll have to be little bit worried about the darker stuff here. See, you have to be careful when you draw all these things. Okay, so you have to use little narrower brush ideally. So I'm changing to a smaller brush, because these are very small precise things which can go wrong in very quickly. So basically a lot of blue stuff inside, so I'm just filling some area with just blue. See, you might think that these are all not working as I told, but you will, what you need is just suggestion. Okay, you don't want anything that is very precise. And if you watch very carefully, there is some sort of a boat or something behind. We'll just suggest that also there. Yeah. Okay. This is some decision that we take now. I'm afraid that has gone too dark. Okay, just I'm taking a tissue paper and just rubbing on that so that it falls little light. I don't want it to be that much of darker. See, these are the kind of dynamic decision you make. I haven't planned this in advance, but I thought I'll make it, but it created some issues. The tone was incorrect. So immediately we lifted the colors so that it looked convincing. Don't hesitate to even touch your watercolor with, not a problem. You can always do that. See, you should be happy making. While painting, you should be happy. That's it. Whether following the rules is the secondary, I would say. If you are happy doing certain things and if your work still remains convincing, then go for that. What you have to be boldly attempting certain things, because if you don't attempt, then you will not come to know. I'm taking a very narrow brush now. This is a very narrow brush for some of these rigors or something, whatever. Thick paint. Okay. Narrow, very narrow kind of brush. And I think that's it. You're done with that. Now go for this particular thing. Here also you could make something. Okay. Really do not know what I am doing here. I'm just trying to make something here also. Right, I think we are pretty much done now. We have to add some what do you call this, maybe if you really think, you can add some characters. So there is, you could make some characters here, but probably we should have made some white spots here. So let us see if I can convert some of this into characters. Okay, see, everything is possible. You have to think, you have to look at and see where you can make the characters. So in these boards you can make some suggestion of characters. Okay, because this is too tiny step, so you'll have to make something like this. No scope for big characters there. Here also you could make some characters. Okay. We have to take some brighter colors probably. I'll take some little bit of red here. This is Crimson Lake. Okay, I would have preferred some orange. Maybe I'll take some permanent orange also, and I will make some characters. Now you have to make some figures somewhere. I think you have to identify where you are going to make some figures. So I would say I'll make some figures, maybe I'll make some figure here. This will be the maybe face. Okay. So since you are doing it from imagination, you have to think about the perspective and other things. So you have to really be good at all those things. This is a little bit overpowering, I know that there is a lot of contrast now there for that. But I tend to still do that. Okay, now this area looks a little bit dull to me. Okay, this area looks a little bit of dull to me. It would have been better if there was something. I really do not know. So this is the time when you keep modifying with the painting, and you will end up kind of even spoiling it at some point. But you have to refrain yourself from doing such things, but sometimes you may find it is required to make it look a little bit of complete. Okay, now all looks fine to me. This area I am thinking that it is little light still, So what I will do is I'll make it little darker. Okay, so I have to be careful when doing that. I'll make some plain water wash, and then I will make some bluish color, bluish violetish color, and then maybe little scary touching this area because this is still wet. Okay, you can keep doing it until you're tired. So, but I will stop it here, and what I will do is I'll wait it for drying, and I might give some white highlights at some places to make it appear, finished. Okay. Okay. It is not fully dry but almost dry. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make some highlighting touches with the white. As I was telling earlier, usage of white is little bit always argued topic. You can decide not to use this approach at all, but I tend to use it. Some highlighting, I always like this certain highlights to be done with white, because that allows you to make some smooth washes without worrying about leaving the white space precisely in advance. So all the top of the head and the shoulders, I'm making it so that they do a little bit of pop-up. That's it. Okay. So somewhere you can, at some places it looks good if you have some white touches. Now, don't overdo this. Just very limited. Very limited, that's it. Some of these wires and all, it will look good. I think that's it. We'll not make any more. Okay. Now the finishing point of signing. So you can keep doing a lot of infinite number of things here, but you have to decide when to finish. See, I'm using some kind of orange red here, so I wanted to balance that with my signature done in orange. You can use any color for your signature, that is up to you, but I prefer doing with orange here, so that that's it. We'll call it off, and we'll take out the tape now. You have to be careful when you take out the tape because it might peel off your paper. Okay, now this is the finished work. So if you compare that with your reference, not reference, this is the comparison with what we did as a thumbnail, and if you look at the actual reference, this is the reference. You'll find that a lot of things we have changed from the reference to this. We have made it very simple, but it still looks pretty. So I think we have paid justice to the reference, and if you have any doubt, any queries, you can always come in touch with me. This is not the only way of doing it. You can do it in infinite possible ways, and if I do it on another day, probably it will be totally different. It all depends upon what your mood is. Basically, I like to think as watercolor is a reflection of your mood at the point, execution. When at this particular mood, at this particular point, this would be the reflection of my mind, I think. It's just my thought. You don't have to agree. So that's what was the discussion for today. Please do practice simplifying watercolor works from reference. Watercolor works making from reference. If you have any doubts, please put your queries in the comment. You can raise the questions to me. I'll try to answer as quickly as possible. Thank you very much. See you in a different video. Thank you.